FIghtWrite podcast, a writer's resource for writing fight scenes, action, and violence. I am your host, Carla Hoke. If you are new to the show, welcome. Hop over to my blog at FIghtWrite, one word, FIghtWrite.net, and check out the latest posts, and check out my book, FIghtWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes, out with Writer's Digest. When I wrote the book, I wanted people who knew more than me to vet the book for correctness. And thankfully, I know some amazing people who have forgotten more than I will ever learn. One of those is my guest today, my friend, I'm going to start with friend, new proud papa, and edged weapons expert, Master Kirk McCune. How are you today, Kirk?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you, Carla. Great to speak with you again.
Okay, first question first. Is your baby the cutest baby ever?
He's a good-looking kid. Although he doesn't look like me, that's why, because he looks like his mother.
He's an adorable baby. And you and I have chatted a little bit about parenthood, and boy, doesn't it make you tougher.
Oh, man, it's not for wimps, that's for sure.
It is not. It is not. Okay, tell people how they can find you on social media.
Well, I have masterkirk.com is a website that we're trying to build up, talk about, my classes and a seminar schedules and things like that. But I'm mainly on Facebook under Kirk McCune and, with that Instagram or whatever. And Baha'u'llah.org is our main website for the club, for the association, the Baha'u'llah Martial Arts Association, also called Hiron Arnisa Skrima. Mm-hmm. And there's some very great history and interesting little tidbits on there also.
Okay. And McCune is McCune, and Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah, right?
Baha'u'llah, come what may.
I got it. Baha'u'llah. And so look that up. Tell people what Baha'u'llah is, because when I say Baha'u'llah, people look at me like maybe I just had some type of cerebral event. I'm like, yeah, that's a word. Go ahead and tell what Baha'u'llah is.
Baha'u'llah is a Tagalog word, a Filipino concept of let God do it, come what may. It is mainly, we use it because it was the slogan for Grandmaster Leo Hiron when he was Sergeant Leo Hiron in World War II. And Leo Hiron has been awarded the Congressional Gold Medal for heroism for his service in World War II. And he's also the recipient of 2 Bronze Stars for his fighting in the Philippines, where he was a member of the 978th Signal Service Corps. And they were commandos directly supervised by General Douglas MacArthur, fighting the Japanese in the Philippines. And the interesting thing as far as our discussion is that Grandmaster Hiron mainly engaged the Japanese sword-to-sword combat. He fought with a 36-inch long Talon-Asan sword, bolo, single-handled sword, fought against the Japanese katanas. Yes. Because they needed to maintain their secret movement in the jungle. The Filipino fighters, he was the U.S. military, but as a Filipino from the area, he was used as a commando because he knew how to get around. They used this long Talon-Asan sword, and since the Japanese officers were wanting to take trophies and didn't have any respect for the Filipino fighters, they would engage with their swords also. A very unique sort of combative experience, and that's what our art is based on.
And it is a shorter sword than the katana. About how long is it?
Well, they're similar lengths.
Are they? They seem so much shorter.
The Talon-Asan, well, it's a little shorter, okay. And it's not as robust. It's definitely not as robust. A katana will cut through a Talon-Asan, but that's why our art is so much evasion and not at all sword to sword. And, depending on the quality of the swords that were produced for the Japanese and the ones that were being produced for the, Grandmaster Hiron and his group, it's a toss-up of which sword was stronger. So there's similar length, but the interesting part for Grandmaster Hiron is that his sword was much longer than the average bolo or machete, U.S. Army issue machete that was being used against the Japanese at that time. So there was a lot of dead Japanese soldiers that were very much surprised by what was coming at them from the 978 Signal Corps guys.
Are they similar weight?
I think a katana's heavier.
Is it?
Because you use the Talanasan with one hand, where it seems katana is mainly used with two hands.
That's true.
Which kind of makes them more similar length anyways. But definitely the methodology behind the use was very different.
You know, people think of katanas as very light swords, and they are. They are very light swords. 3 pounds. The one that I practiced was 3 pounds. Let me tell you what. 3 pounds gets heavy. It gets heavy quick. And I think sometimes when people put swords in the hands of their characters, they think, oh, you know, the sword's like 2 or 3 pounds. They can swing it all day. Ha. You will not be swinging it all day. You get sore from it. Or at least, wimpy me, I did. That's just me.
No, even Grandmaster Roan said that, you know, the first thing that goes in combat is your legs. You would get tired.
Yes. Yeah.
You're tense anyways. And swinging a sword, you know, you got to be under control with your blade. That's the trick. Anyone can swing a sword, but then it'll break, or you know, you'll be open to counterattack. All those problems that you get. So control, discipline, all that stuff takes energy.
It does. I remember our warm-ups, we would bring the katana over our head. We had to stand, you know, very sturdy, and we would have to chop down fast and stop it at a particular place, you know, to learn control. But we had to do it fast enough to make a swish. I think I talked to you about this. And so we would do the warm-ups, and you know, my sensei would come by and he was like, okay, Carla, swish. And I'm like, sir, I am trying so hard to swish. You have no idea how hard I'm trying to swish. It is much more difficult than it looks. The control and the speed, all that together. You and I could talk for hours about this, but I need to get to one subject. I know, I'm so sorry. You know, I'll talk all day about this. I am often asked questions about edged weapons meaning weapons with a blade. The sharp portion of the blade is called the edge. So a double-edged blade means 2 sharp sides. You don't say double-bladed knife. You say double-edged knife. I'm asked about edged weapons quite a bit. And of all the questions that I'm asked, the one that I get the most is, can my character carry a sword on his back? I get this question a lot. I say, sure, they can, but should they? And I am going to defer this question to you, an edged weapons expert. What is your opinion on a character carrying a sword on their back?
Well, you know me, I go along with what you say, boss.
That's right, you do.
I gotta agree. I mean, we've always talked that any weapon needs, the first priority is the efficiency of its use. Correct. What is it going to be used for? What are my needs? I can see why people are asking this question, though. As I thought about our topic, the tradition in pop culture and films is heavily weighted with characters, you know, carrying their sword on their back. I just watched Conan the other day. Yeah. Conan the Barbarian. He's carrying it on his back. He has a nice little mechanism to bring it from his back as he's transporting it into a combative situation, where he brings it down onto his hip.
Right.
But in the comics and all of that, a lot of times they show, you know, the sword on the back. All the Conan movies, like I said, like Blade, the movie Blade, he carries his sword on his back. Beastmaster carrying his sword on his back. That's a great movie, by the way.
It is, and I've seen it where they have 2 swords on their back. So you see, like, one each shoulder.
Lord of the Rings with the elf. The elf carries 2 swords on the back. Right. But that's interesting because, and it's something I wanted to talk about. He's got the 2 swords in his back, but his main weapon is the bow.
Correct.
So he needs to have his hands free, which would, you know, that would be a good reason that you'd want to carry your secondary weapon in some other space. Correct. Besides up in front of you that might get bound in your with your main weapon. Braveheart, he had carried that big old Claymore on his back for a while.
How much does the Claymore weigh? Can you think off the top of your head how much they weigh?
Well, a long sword, a medieval longsword, I think, weighs 7 or some pounds.
That's
So it's a
it.
little heavier than that.
Right. People think they weigh like 10 or 12 pounds, and that's not the
No,
case.
they're not that.
They weigh
But
7
you
to
know,
12
an
pounds.
interesting thing about that I learned is that a rapier,
Mm-hmm.
a Renaissance rapier, weighs basically the same as a longsword. Isn't
Oh.
that crazy? It's just the distribution of the weight.
Oh, it's near the hand.
It's near the hand,
Oh,
so
I bet
that it
that
doesn't
makes a
feel
difference.
as heavy.
Yeah.
That tripped me out. And then when we
Yeah.
played with some of the replicas, yeah, it's incredible. It's just the way that you distribute
The
the weight,
balance. Yep.
and they're made for, an average person to be able to wield them. So it makes a lot of sense. These things are nothing if not practical. There's a
Right.
reason for everything about every weapon that we talk about.
So what are the times when you might, okay, I don't know, should we go with the negative or the positive first? What do you
Well,
think?
let me just
Go ahead.
point out one more thing, and
Sure.
I think that there is a reason why they do this, and the writers might want to think about this. It's in films
Mm-hmm.
and comics because it's dynamic. It's the
It
same
is.
sort of idea as when the detective is sneaking into the room and he's got his gun up by his face
Yeah.
and he's gonna sneak around the corner and what you do to that guy is you take his gun and you put it in against his head and let him shoot himself, right?
Right.
That's not the place where you want your gun. But in the movies, it looks awesome because you get the actor's face and you
Right.
get the gun and you can get the music going. And I think
Right.
it's very similar idea is that they show the actor's face. There's his sword hilt right there by his head.
Right.
You can show the sword in every scene where if it's held where it might be more practical for fighting, maybe, as we'll talk about on the hip, it's not in the scene. It's not in
Right.
the face shot.
Yeah, and in the case of
So
Conan, he was Mr. Olympia. Of course
yeah,
they're going to have him. I mean, it makes sense. He's going to put his arms back over his head. Why wouldn't he?
exactly. That's going to show his biceps. It's going to show all the good stuff. So
Yeah.
that's not wrong. I mean, if you're looking to
It's
create
not
that
wrong.
feeling of power and you want to, and that's the thing that's important in your
Right.
writing or in your comic or whatever. Yeah, put it on the back. If you need to fight somebody at that moment and you're drawing from the back and he's drawing from his waist or he's already drawn his weapon,
Right.
it's like an ambush. Well, you're dead meat.
Right. Advantage them.
It is because it's all, it's who can get. Grandmaster Harone said it best. Whoever gets there first is the winner. And that means
Right.
whoever delivers a real cut first will win. The
Yeah.
longest, here's something interesting and why you got to think about these things very deeply. Grandmaster Harone fought the Japanese. He won 2 Bronze Stars for his bravery in combat. He fought those men within arm's length with a sword.
Right.
And he said that the longest engagement that he saw was 2 strikes.
There you go.
It either happened where he swung and hit him, or the guy would swing and get countered, and then that fight was over.
Mm-hmm.
These things happen very quickly in combat. Now, duels can be a little bit more, but really, duels come down to 1 or 2 decisive actions, and the fight's over. With blades, I mean,
Right.
they had to start making the duelists fight with without their shirts on when they started to fight with rapiers, because they would fight to the first blood, but with rapiers, the first blood was through and through thrust to the chest or the head.
Mm-hmm.
And so the guys started wearing chainmail and armor underneath their shirts because they didn't want to die.
Hey, I don't blame them. That's just good thinking. So I would think that all things being equal, you and I are facing off. We have the exact same wielding speed and we can draw at the same time. When you have it on your hip and I have it on my back, you have a distinct advantage. Even if we are equal speed, what is your advantage drawing it off the hip versus me drawing it off the back?
Well, a draw from the hip allows for the classic upward rising strike, which we call a low upward figure 8, and it is a wicked strike to try and deflect or evade.
Right.
It comes from below your eyesight, and my targets are moving away from you where my blade is moving into you. Very
Right.
hard to beat. The downward strike just inherently brings the arm and the torso into the fight as a target.
Right.
Now, and that there's always exceptions, right? I mean, there's
Sure.
whole arts devoted to drawing from behind and the swords are specifically made to be efficiently drawn from behind the back. Many of the ninja arts have this stuff, and it's like we talked about, they needed the sword to be on the back because maybe it was a secondary weapon, or they needed to do things with their hands. But that being said, I think just with the scenario that you paint,
Right.
I think that the access point of the hips, or
Right.
at the waist, is superior.
Right. Yeah. And I'm, again, anybody listening, we are not saying you can never carry it on your back. Sure, there's going to be times we carry it on the back. Again, Lord of the Rings, the elf character had it on his back. Why? Because he needed his hands for a bow. If you have things on your hips, there may be times when you need to carry it on your back. But the question is that the most efficient place for wielding?
I think a way to show some knowledge and power in the writing of the character, uh, you know, many times the old treatises show the mercenaries, soldiers of fortunes, carrying their weapons on their back.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that they're carrying them more like gear at that time. That when they would be into battle, they have modified that carry into something more practical for them, which I think would be the waist carry.
Right.
Or they're using the sword that's on their back as a secondary weapon that they're going to be fighting with their primary weapon, and
Right.
then have a chance to draw at their leisure, from the back.
Right.
I think if Grandmaster Rowan walked in and they would get ambushed and they carried their swords on the waist, or he carried the longsword under his arm
Mm-hmm.
with a special mechanism that allowed that
Uh-huh.
that upward draw from
Right.
under his arm. So, and then there was a lot of the guys just carried their sword in their hand.
Oh,
They just had it gripped with a little piece of cloth, or a
right.
wooden, two pieces of wood that was just held around the sword. And then the sword they would open their left hand and start fighting with the right.
Huh.
So, but that was all done from the hip.
Right. Okay. Huh. I think about it kind of the way I do when military guys go in with their rifle. When they're just walking around, they may have their rifle slung back behind them. But the closer they get to any type of action at all, they bring it up in front of themselves.
That's a really good point right there.
Thank
You
you.
can carry your weapon many different ways.
Right.
Now you got to start to think though about access points. Now
Right.
there's arts, Sayat Kali, Atiyan Kali. They have dedicated blood, sweat, and tears to working out very complicated and strategic placement of blades, access points under the arm, from the shoulder, from the
Right.
ankle, from the waist, from the back.
Right.
Many different ways to get at different weapons for different things. So there's that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But as you get closer to the combative action, you need to have your weapon
Right.
out. Grandmaster Rowan, our Bahala doesn't concentrate on drawing, because at
Right.
the point of Bahala, the fight is on. Our weapon is already out
Mm-hmm.
and ready to go. The
Right.
problem, and I think that that's important for writers of fantasy or whatever to recognize, just like all the other things that you put in there. Great book, FIghtWrite. I love that book.
Thank you.
Um, what's the practicality of what they're doing? You're going to change. You're going to change because of the range
Right.
and what you're doing.
Right. Everything is, when it comes to weaponry, every single thing about the weapon, from the way it looks to where it sits, serves a purpose, even if it's decorative. even if there's just something on a sword or a gun or anything because it's decorative, that decoration may show who made it. That's its purpose. It may show how wealthy the carrier is. That's its purpose. Nothing about a weapon is arbitrary. So
Status.
yeah.
Here's a great story for that. Real quick, Grandmaster Harone had a tassel, a 3-inch tassel on the bottom of his scabbard. And one of the Irish students asked, did they use that scabbard as part of the draw of the weapon? Because in Ireland, the warriors would carry their weapon in their hand. It had a tassel on the bottom. They would, when the fight would start, they would put the scabbard on the ground and step on the tassel and draw the sword out.
Okay.
Grandmaster Harone, it wasn't for that. It was purely decorative. It was made by one of the village women to remind him of why they were fighting, of who they were fighting for. So they gave him that tassel on his sword that they made, and they said, "Remember us. Thank you for helping us."
Huge motivator. Huge.
Yeah,
motivator.
For him it really was. Yeah.
That's a huge. Okay, explain the mechanism that they put their swords in, because it's a clip almost. Explain how that looks, because it is the coolest looking thing.
Oh, for Grandmaster Harone?
Right.
Yeah, it was on a sash around his shoulder, and it hung right under his left armpit. Right. It hung down his leg, and he said that as he walked, that tassel would just barely touch the ground. Mm-hmm. So to try to draw a sword, 36-inch sword from there, you could try to do it, but he said it took 3 tries to draw it straight out. Right. So what they did was they developed a scabbard that actually opened with a hinge like a clam. So the whole front of the scabbard would open, and he could draw the sword out in one motion, just pushing it out the front. So it opened kind of like a clam.
That is so important for a long sword. That's something else that writers don't realize. When I had a katana and I pulled it out of the scabbard, oh my gosh, my sensei is somewhere wringing his hands because I'm not using the right terminology here. I would run out of arm before I could completely take the katana out. You have to pull the scabbard back and pull it away from the weapon. In my case, I had to. Everybody had to. So it's not just a one sling out of a scabbard, but see, in his case, in the case of Master Harone, he figured out a way around that.
That's right. And then all the guys started adopting it. Yeah, they were, because of the practicality, because they needed to be able to march with their hands free, but then they kept getting, the Japanese soldiers would pop up in front of them, and they would have to fight from an ambush. And so they had to come up with a way to get their swords into play. And for our topic of the sword on the back, the draw is going to be limited by how long and how well they can get the length of that sword off their back. So that's another thing to think about if you're going to put the sword on the back.
Something else that bothers me on the back is, even if you do have a clip mechanism like Master Harone, you are drawing a live blade, 1 or 2 live edges behind you where you do not see, coming up behind your head. Now, you know what? You're a master. You're an edge weapons expert, but I don't trust myself not to skin the back of my head, number one, or chop somebody's head off behind me.
We were practicing multiple opponents. We were actually fighting 3-on-2, and I pulled my weapon out and I whacked my buddy with it.
It happens. It happens.
It happens.
Okay, we are running out of time, folks. On Instagram, if you will go to my Instagram, Carla, CARLA.C.Hoch, HOCH, and if you look at my little collections, I have one that is labeled FIghtWrite, and I have different sparring videos, and I know I have some of Kirk in there, but you see them sparring with rattan sticks, and you see how quickly they hit each other on the arm. Okay, well, when it's a rattan stick, it just it hurts. When it's a sword, it's a hand gone. Or at the very least, the tendons are severed, so you can't use the hand. It goes quickly. You know, the Princess Bride scenario where they go on and they chat, that's a wonderful story, but that's not how real sword play happened. Correct?
Oh, it's so true. And if you're going for that reality, these men have trained for their entire life,
Right.
and their life is on the line.
Right.
And they wanted to they wanted to kill their opponent, stop them as fast as possible.
Right.
And there is no time for any flourish,
Right.
fancy.
Right.
In fact, if you think about it, most of the dueling that you heard about, most of it was actually done. The real killing was done from ambush, because it's so freaking dangerous to fight with a blade.
Right.
So, like you've always said, and I completely agree, you can do it. Should you do it? Why are you doing it? How can you do it?
Right.
All those things need to be thought out if you're going to bring any sort of realism to what you're talking about with the blades. And one way to get a lot of knowledge and a lot of help with your writing is to go ahead and go like you've done and go ahead and train with some of these arts. People have devoted their lives to these principles that we're talking about, and it's not secret. It's not magic.
Right.
It's very practical, and it opens up a whole new world of material for anyone who's trying to, artistically sort of represent, this vast area of bladed combatives.
Right. Folks, if you want some experience with blades, look up where you are. It's a little easier to remember. Filipino martial arts, that's one place to start. You can look up Bahala Na, as we said, although I think you'll get more come up about Filipino martial arts than you will Bahala Na right off the top of the bat. After that, you can also look HEMA, HEMA. That's Historical European Martial Arts. My gosh, there are Groupons for HEMA all the time. They meet in parks. HEMA people are some cool people. Look up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, look up Iaido. That's what I did. IAIDO. That's with Aikido. You can also just get on the internet and start looking for places where you can go in, if nothing else, just to hold it in your hand, because I think you'll be surprised at the weight of it. Swords are historically lighter than people think, and guns are heavier than people think. That's what I have found. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kirk, all the way from Hawaii. What's the weather like today? Let me guess. Perfect.
Perfect weather. It's about 80 degrees. I can hear the ocean right now crashing as we speak.
Poor man. How do you handle all that stress? You poor man.
It's rough.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kirk. Guys, look up Master Kirk, masterkirk.com. Masterkirk.com. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Thanks, Carla. It's great talking to you again.
It is great talking to you. Go kiss that baby.
Okay, you got it.
Have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, guys, that's it for this Fight Right broadcast. Remember, you can send me questions on Twitter at Carla Hoch, CarlaHoch, and check out my blog, FIghtWrite, FIghtWrite.net, and my book, which Master Kirk went through, I promise, Fight Right, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes with Writer's Digest. And that's it for this episode. You have your answer. Until the next episode of the Fight Right podcast, get blood on your pages.